Like with our exemptions, we're dealing with. Brian, Brian, if you got a start.
Just give people 30 seconds to settle in, and I'll call the meeting to order. Five, four. I realize I said 30 seconds, not half a minute, so sorry. I'll call the meeting to order at 5:31. Introduction of amendments to the agenda.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, there is one item. It's been circulated to members at their desks. It will be under item 7, reports. It'll be item 14, resolution of support, Mayor Lawrence serving on AMO Northern Caucus.
I have a motion to confirm the agenda as amended. Councillor Bath, seconded by Councillor Fenelon. All in favor? Approved. Declarations of pecuniary interest.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, we have one declaration from Councillor Forbes for item number 7.3, municipal accommodation tax. General nature of the conflict. Councillor Forbes is the owner of a tourist outfitter business that would be impacted by that could be impacted by the municipal accommodation tax.
Thank you. Adoption of minutes. Motion to adopt the minutes of the May 16, 2018 regular council meeting, May 16, 2018 special council meeting, and June 5th, 2018 special council meeting. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Curlew, seconded by Councillor Fenelon. All in favor? All in favor? Thank you. Carried. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. Sorry.
Trying to get a hard copy over there. We did the minutes for, did we do the approval of minutes?
Yes.
Okay, I did one, I just
We
wanted,
just did that, or you, sorry.
I had a question about one of the minutes.
We just approved it, but we'll go back if the
Yeah,
council.
well,
Thank you.
clarify. On the issue of the second integrity commissioner report, it said that it was defeated, the thing was defeated. I thought council accepted that one.
Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, no. Council didn't accept either of the recommendations from either report.
Yeah, we did not accept them. Good. Items requiring separate discussion. Item 1, reallocation of capital funding. Item 2, speed reduction zone First Avenue adjacent to Sioux Mountain School. Is that a yes? You'd like to lift it? Or? Okay. Item 3, municipal accommodation tax. Councillor Fenelon, so we'll lift item 3. Item 4, the keeping of chickens. Councillor Timpson. Item 5, amend Schedule A of Bylaws 5712, delegation of powers and duties. Item 6, update signing authorities. Thank you. I wasn't looking forward to reading that one. Item 7, authorization to borrow funds from the Bank of Montreal. Mechanical lift, facilities truck, fire hall roof, landfill loader. Item 8, airport commercial retail expansion funding agreement. Item 9, declare land surplus. Item 10, Blueberry Festival grant for insurance. Item 11, video surveillance policy. Councillor Bath. Item 12, clean desk policy. Councillor Bath. Sounds more onerous than it is, but records retention bylaw. Item 14, the amended agenda item, approval of Mayor Lawrence nomination for Northern Caucus of Association of Municipalities of Ontario. So the items I have that we've lifted are items 3, 4, 11, 12. Everybody agree with that? Councillor Timpson?
Sorry, could we just add number 2, 7, 2, speed reduction zone?
Item 2, 3, 4, 7, 12. Did I miss one? Sorry, let me do that one more time. 2, 3, 4, 11, and 12, not 7. 11, not 7. All right. A motion to adopt the items not requiring separate discussion. The council approves recommendations number 1, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 14. Moved by Councillor Curlew, seconded by Councillor Bath. All in favor? Carried. And before we go to items requiring separate discussion, we do have one delegation tonight, Mr. Michael O'Shea, President of the Information Professionals, presentations on the Records Management Program. So, Mr. O'Shea, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for inviting me here tonight. Just to give a quick background, Brian McKinnon asked me to come up and do an audit or a review of the information management programs here at the town. It's basically how you're managing and using information, how setting it up, and what improvements could be made. So we did an audit. We've looked at it. The report is here. I'm just going to give you the highlights of the report. Be more than happy to answer any questions you have, probably to ad nauseum. I will talk about it, but we'll go through the quickly. I'll just give the general findings. There is a detailed report, should any of you wish to read it. And I'll give the major recommendations, not the kind of less than major ones, the minor ones that go. We did develop a strategic plan, and we'll go from there, what we want to do. You have some of the foundational elements. As anything you build has to have a foundation. For an information management system, the first foundation is a policy that tells everybody what's expected of them, what kinds of information we're going to manage. And so that is one of the things that has been developed. It's an evolving policy. As new issues come up, as things like social media and texting and come up, we have to deal with those things as we go along. So that's one of them. The other thing that we have provided is the classification scheme, or the filing methodology. You can't develop anything unless we can come up with a general consensus about we name things. We have to have kind of a standard methodology for that. For instance, I use the example all the time. If someone asks me how long to keep an employee file, I give the consultant answer that says it depends, but it does depend upon what you put in that file. If it's work history, it's one thing. If it's pension information, if it's payroll information, if there's medical information, all the rules of the game change. So we first have to come up with that definition. We have provided that. It's called the Ontario Municipal Records Management System. It's in use by over 200 Ontario municipalities, so it does have quite a bit of credibility to it and quite a few people around. The third aspect is what you just, I think it passed, right, Brian? Was it one of the things that went through? The retention bylaw that tells us how long to keep records to meet legal, audit, and not just financial audit, ministry audit and everything like that, and then operational considerations. So we make sure that we're keeping records only for the period of time that we really need them to fulfill legal requirements and operational requirements. We don't want to take information away from people. So those three foundational elements you have in place. You do have a staff resource right now, which is great, because the issue is always how do we go and implement this with all the other things we have to do. But the CERC, Joe Serrera, has been hired to fulfill that position. He's very enthusiastic, and we have a plan to increase his knowledge and his experience in terms of information management. Right now, most departments are doing their own thing. That's not a bad thing. That's normal. I mean, it's not the greatest thing. But people want to do the right thing. But in the absence of being told what is the right thing from a corporate perspective, they'll do what they think is best. Unfortunately, it's not always correct. In fact, seldom is from a corporate perspective. But they're trying. So now we're coming up with a program that will give them guidance to how to do things. So it makes retrieval difficult and sporadic. It means that if someone in the clerk's department, no, clerk's department always does it right. Clerk's department puts something away, someone in planning may not be able to find it or things of that nature. When someone leaves, we can't find information that they left behind and things like that. So there's a lot of information in the organization that's not being able to be retrieved and used the way you really need it to make decisions on all the other things you're doing, like budgets and all these kind of things you talked about today. The retention bylaw you just approved, so that's excellent. We got that. There are many outdated records being stored. In the absence, again, of direction, people will keep everything forever because they don't know whether they're allowed to throw it away or not, which is the wrong thing to do. It causes an awful lot of overhead for you to be able to go weed through all these records that you're looking for when a lot of them are redundant or obsolete. And it can also cause a lot of cost for you should you get into protracted FOI requests, Freedom of Information requests, or litigation where information has to be discovered. The rule of law, and I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just telling you my experience, is that if information exists, it is discoverable. So even if you have records that you should have destroyed 20 years ago, if they can be part of the litigation, you can be asked to find them. So it's not the sole reason we want to do it, but it's a big thing to make sure that's doing. So we want to get rid of these records. Now with your retention bylaw, we have a guideline to be able to do that. The electronic records volume is growing exponentially. I'm glad. I'm encouraged to see all of you using tablets. The amount of record information is growing. Everything is created electronically. The conservative estimate from your IT staff is that it's growing about 15% per year. But when you compound that, that means over 3 years, you have a 63% growth of volume of information that's not being managed. In fact, probably being managed less well than physical records. So this is continuing to grow and grow and grow. And the longer you leave it, the more it's going to cost you to fix it. There is very limited access for staff to access records outside the office, whether they're looking at economic development or permits or inspections or whatever it happens to be. Once they leave the office, they can't get at that information. So if they don't have it with them, they have to come back, they have to delay things. And quite frankly, in terms of economic development, having the ability to find that information and answer questions for potential developers creates a really good environment and impression of how the town is structured. But it's really important for them to have that. So it's a real impediment to people not being able to do that. Everybody has the problem with emails. Nobody knows how to manage them properly. But the problem is that most of them right now, we're using them to contain a lot of corporate records. It's not just invitations to lunch or stuff that's general in nature. There's information that's there that's a corporate record. And because of the nature of Outlook or email, it's accessible only to one person, the person who owns that box. So in effect, that information is being kept from other co-workers who could really use that information. And that volume is growing and growing and growing. It's not unusual to find people with 6,000 or 7,000 emails stored in Outlook or in their PST files. So that's a real problem. On the very positive side, you have an excellent IT program here. The person who manages it is very, very good. I was really impressed with his. And so you have a good structure and a person who understands both your business and IT to work very well. You don't have any software, though, to manage records, to be able to find them, to put some kind of structure around them, how we name records, how long we keep them, allowing people to be able to see what records need to be destroyed and what records exist within the organization. And that creates a real impediment to managing and using information. Software is we all want to go on and search and find stuff. And there are some implications of sharing personal information. That's the place that can bite you, the kind of information that can bite you in the butt, that can really be embarrassing if it's revealed inadvertently. So we need to educate people more on some of the implications of it. One of the biggest things that has to be known in a municipality, there's two. One is that it's on a need-to-know basis only. You can only get access to personal information if it relates to your job. And the second one is that you can only keep personal information for as long as the purpose which you collected it is still valid. So once you collect it, once that purpose is gone, you have to get rid of the information. It's not, well, we might keep it around. So they're very direct on that kind of thing. So we need to have a little bit more, not that anybody's doing anything drastically wrong, but just as some nuances in dealing with personal information need to be improved. We have a bunch of recommendations. The findings, there's a lot, but basically you're starting out, you're in a newbie kind of organization that has some of the tools but needs to roll it out. We're suggesting that you implement the Ontario Municipal Records Management System on a phased rollout, starting with the clerk, and then going to economic development and HR. We picked the other, clerk is good because, you know, that's the office that should be the example, and economic development and HR because there are some exposure to potential loss of records in there. So we would like to be, which I'll cover in a moment, which we'd like to be able to address right off the bat. Implementing the approved retention bylaw to active and inactive records as we implement. It's nice to look at records and to look at the records that exist and say, do we need to keep this at all? You know, the retention bylaw might say that we can get rid of a whole bunch of it or whatever, and then apply the new methodology of organizing the information at the same time. Getting rid of some of the records that are stored downstairs, being kept again because nobody knows what to do with them. That might be labeled so in a way that nobody really knows what's in them, but getting rid of that information. We're also suggesting that you take the approach, and I recommend this for every organization, to insist on getting records provided to you in electronic format rather than in paper format. About 95 or 98% of all the records that you do receive are produced electronically. It seems to me, well, it is. It's a great waste of time and effort and money to receive something that's produced electronically, take it in paper format, and then spend time scanning it into a system to make it electronic again. It's the ability to, and the legal admissibility of electronic records has been proven in this country for 25 years for image records and 18 years now for electronic records. So you can start to move towards more electronic by stopping getting so much paper. I find it ludicrous sometimes when people get a fax, they take it off in paper, they scan it back into the system again. It was already electronic when it came down the wire. So it's an easy way to reduce your reliance on paper records. We're also suggesting that you purchase dockable laptops and second monitors for people, for the managers, so that for the managers then when they go out from the office, because you don't have a good pipeline here and network for access back to the servers here, they would then have the information that they need that relates to their job, and they'd be able to do that. As they come back, any changes they make would be synchronized into the system and work from that. It's also very important for people to be provided a second monitor to work for electronic records. One of the problems people will say was, I have the invoice in my hand and I need to see the PO. I don't want to split the screen. So a second monitor costs about $160 for people. It's a very inexpensive way to encourage people to start using electronic records. So I've got the invoice on one side, the PO on the other side. I can compare them, do my approvals, and go from there. It's a very, very good way to do it and get things done. We're suggesting also for emails that you train people on what's a very, very easy system of drag and drop to move their emails that is a corporate record, not just a transitory thing, but a corporate record, from their Outlook right into a folder that would include Word documents, Excel documents, whatever, dealing with that particular project, that particular employee, that particular subject. So anything dealing with a new fire hall or a new rink or whatever it happens to be, whatever it is, if there's an email dealing with it, it would be brought out of Outlook or out of the email system right into the folder that exists with all the other documents that relate to that, and so we don't have to keep moving back and forth and back and forth. So in addition to that, what we need to do, when you get the tools in place and people train to say to people, Outlook is no longer a place to keep records. It's just a delivery mechanism, which is what it's designed to do. It's designed to deliver the mail to you electronically. How you use it then, we want it to move into a corporate repository. That forces a behavior on people to say, we're not going to do that. I told them this afternoon very quickly that one of our law firms, the second largest law firm, Gallagher LaFleur Henderson, when they, in that law firm, and don't get too excited about this, but it's a progressive one, an aggressive one, sorry. When they open an email, they can reply to it, forward it, delete it, or save it out of Outlook. They can't close it. They have to do something with it. And the principle in that organization is any email that's more than 45 days old is blown out of the system, because if it's been sitting there for more than 6 weeks, it's not a record, or it would have been moved into the client file and stuff like that. So we get to that kind of methodology, but you have to have a tool to make that easy for people, and we have a tool. We can do that. We're also suggesting that you move to what we call an electronic document and records management system. What that is a system that combines the ability to manage records in both paper and electronic, to apply retention, to apply security, confidentiality, vital records protection, business continuity, all that kind of stuff. But it also provides a collaborative kind of forum where we can, as a group, we can find a place to work together electronically. So if we're working on a project, there may be a project site that the engineers work on, the treasury works on, the clerk works on, everybody works on that site and does it. We want to do that. But before we do that, we need to find out and develop a set of requirements that say this is what we want an electronic document and records management system to look like for Sioux Lookout. You know, you don't want what the City of Toronto or Brampton or what everybody else has, or even next door system. We need to define those requirements, because if you don't define the requirements, you may pick the wrong piece of tool to settle your, to solve your problem. So we first need to define the problem, define what we need to do, and we're going to do that hopefully in the fall to move forward on that. So when we look for something, we'll know what we're trying to achieve. We're also suggesting a budget for records management software. Sorry, was there, I'm sorry, I didn't, please. No, not necessarily. That's what we're going to try and define. SharePoint is one of the options that could be there. SharePoint's really a platform that you deliver all kinds of applications on. It sits and coordinates everything. It's a very good one. It's one of the biggest ones, and I think the most full-featured. But it may have more than you want, or need rather, and it may even have more than you can afford. But what we want to do is set up a bunch of requirements, go to vendors. First of all, we'll go for a request for information, which would come back to us, ask them to come back and say, based on these requirements, what's the ballpark figure for a budget that we should have? So that we make sure that before we go to it, there's no sense going out with a $60,000 budget when it's going to cost you $250,000. You're wasting time. So we're going to go out with that first to get an idea, what can we afford, what can we go, and then we'll go out to a number of vendors and look. There are options, there are capital, you know, but there's also vendors are moving to a subscription service now a lot, which is operating budget too. So that's what we would want to come back to you and say, hey, here's the ones that can meet our requirements, and here's the options. Council, what do you think we should do? What would be most palatable for us? And it's based on your situation. So, okay? Thank you for the question, yeah. So we're suggesting about $60,000. That's based on my experience for what you want and the kind of things you could do. We're going to try and accumulate that, some of this year's budget and some for next year's budget, and get that kind of thing. We're also asking you to support, and part of Brian's budget would be to get the Communications, Information, and Records Coordinator, who is Joe Serrar, to go and visit other municipalities and do things. We've already tentatively set it up for in October to go and visit Barrie, the County of Simcoe, and the Town of Innisfil, all who have very progressive programs. It's a good way for him to expose himself to those kind of options that could be there and give him some idea. We're also suggesting that you convert employee files, inspection reports, and older drawings to digital format. You have some exposure to losing those. They're all in paper format. And if you had, God forbid, but if you had a fire in here, you could lose all those records. So we're suggesting that you look at the cost of, as an emergency response or business continuity, so that should you have a disaster here, you would be able to recover them. We have gone out to a few places and asked for some quotes, and it's very reasonable. But again, it depends on the volume and how much you have and everything. But it's certainly something you should look at, because you do have a risk there that if you lost all those records, you would have a lot of difficulty perhaps moving forward. In conjunction with that, we're also suggesting that you would have a business continuity plan. Business continuity is different from getting backups done. A business continuity plan says, okay, IT's backs things up, but if we can't get access to this building tomorrow rather, something happens, what services do we as a municipality have to continue to provide? What can't we stop doing? And so what records do we need to have to do that? It's kind of a responsibility on your part to look at that. I'll warn you, as you probably know, it can be expensive, but at least you should go through the process, or the municipality, the manager should go through the process of looking at it and if nothing else, identifying what the risk is and the cost to minimize or mitigate that risk. So we're suggesting that you kind of do that. Those are the major recommendations. I'll give you just a quick highlight what we're doing. We're suggesting that in 2018, because there is something called an election coming up, with not a lot of time, but we can build a lot of the foundational elements that are there. You've already approved the retention bylaw and policy. We're suggesting that you begin, at least, that the management begin to look at the business continuity plan, consider it. It's usually done on a departmental basis and then a corporate basis after. Using the TOMREMS or the TOMREM structure in the clerk's directory, they're already doing that. They've started to roll that out. So they're creating a template that can be used everywhere else. The bylaw to inactive records, I mentioned that. As you go in through, you might as well look at discarding stuff right off the bat. We do develop the requirements for software. It's currently scheduled for just immediately after Labor Day to get that kind of thing done. I'll be coming back to do that. So we'll have time to get it at least cataloged before the election. We're looking at purchasing the dockable laptops and the second monitors, second screens. I don't know if that's in the budget yet or not, Brian, but yes, it is, okay. And then we want to train people on the correct way to save emails. It is the biggest bugbear, but once people are trained, it's very easy. It's not, you just take it and move it from one to the other, one folder to the other. At least get them to using it and stop perpetuating the problem, and that we can start to eliminate that a little bit. And then budget for software for the next year. Next year, we would complete the business continuity plan, complete to implement the records management system, the methodology out onto other departments. We'd like to suggest that you look at least clerical assistance for cleanup of the older records. Some students or clerks come in at low cost who can at least sift through all the old stuff and determine what it is and give you ideas about what could go rather than using a valuable management or staff time for that. There are a lot that can be done that way, very inexpensive. Choose and implement the records. Scan those HR economic and economic development inspection records to get rid of that risk that you may have. And then also to provide a lot of electronic access. It'd be nice if all those records on economic development inspections were available on a tablet like you have as you go out to the field. And then try and emphasize more of electronic records. We want that environment to people to get going in that regards. And having that second monitor provides an awful lot of that. And then training again for Joe to continue that. And then after that, we'd continue to implement additional ongoing staff training for people because it's not a one-time effort. We want to train people. The way we would do it, we'd give them the overall introduction, and then as we do planning or whatever department, we would go in and give them training that's specific to their operational requirements and needs so that they can relate to it rather than having to relate to what the clerk does or whatever, that kind of thing. We would do that. And then we would implement an audit program. And I told the manager this afternoon, I look at an audit program not as something that's a big stick to come down on people. It's a way for us to identify how our records management program needs to improve. Well, we thought we were doing that. We thought you wanted, no, we didn't. So let's retrain. Let's go back and start that. So that's what we're recommending that would roll out in 2020 to 2022 in our 5-year plan. Okay. That's a quick presentation. I'd be more than happy to take any questions, Your Honor.
Take questions. Councillor Southall?
Basically, you're talking about a $60,000 budget there. Like, I'll date myself here. Is that a Chevette? Is that a Chevrolet, or is that a Cadillac?
It's not. It's probably not a Cadillac. It's a Chevy. It's not a Chevette. It's a very good. The kind of software you're looking at would provide common things to electronic records and email, the ability to move email in. You'd be able to search and know that physical records exist someplace, maybe the clerk's department, and call them for that. We'd be able to identify that I don't need a copy because Brian's got one or whatever it happens to be. It's good, middle of the road. Is it SharePoint? No. It's not. It's not SharePoint. But there are options, again, as people start to look at software as a service, the whole game changes a little bit. So, but it's definitely not a Chevette, and it's not a Cadillac. That's a good analogy.
What would be the ongoing costs of this?
It's usually about 18%, so in the neighborhood of about $10,000 per year ongoing cost. If you go to software as a service, then it's different, right? It may be about $15,000 per year, but there's no initial cost. I'm not sure what that would be. You have to scope those out. We definitely present those back to you and look. Okay?
Further questions, Council?
Anytime you want a question. You have questions or whatever. Again, I'll offer it to the managers. Sorry, yes, ma'am.
What about really large documents where you need to be flipping back and forth, back and forth?
It depends on the document and your ability to work with it. A drawing, you know, a large E-size or whatever drawing, I think they're called, architectural drawings, it's very difficult to read on a computer, but they're all generated electronically, right? So it's very easy to store them electronically rather than bringing in paper and paying someone to scan them in. But a large document, it's your ability and your familiarity with the whole thing. Can I give you just a brief example? I'm used to using electronic documents. I am paperless. I have 5 clients who are completely paperless, one of whom is Morrison Hershfield, the engineering firm, one is the Ontario Pension Board. So I'm used to it, the tools that are there. At Morrison Hershfield, just to give you a quick example of what you can do, they have 2 people who are code consultants who, before anything gets sent to a municipality, they spend their time looking over it to identify where it's not applicable to code. These gentlemen have code books that you wouldn't believe, annotated to the nth degree, and they're extremely valuable. The code book you could throw, but not their annotations. They're so valuable. I showed them how they could do the same thing with an electronic code book using simple things like Post-it notes and all kinds of comments on the thing. I also showed them how by doing that, it would be readable, legible, because I couldn't read most of them. Not that I would probably understand it anyways, but I would also, and it was accessible to everybody in the organization, their intellect, their knowledge, their gain. So yes, there are certain things that don't work. There are certain people who prefer paper. I don't have a problem with that, you know, but if you can move and start to at least have it available electronically, then it can reduce the copies all over the place. One of the problems we have is which is the official one. You know, we all got a copy of it, but maybe it was amended later and I didn't get a copy of it. I related to someone, or to the management this year, that keeping track of versions and everything is a big issue. And one municipality I know of in Ontario last year passed the wrong version of their budget because it didn't come back the way they thought it. Well, they thought it was the one that was revised, but it wasn't. It was the one that wasn't sent for revision. So there are ways to handle things and work with them, but if your preference is paper, we can provide that. But, you know, I think we could show you the advantages, the huge advantages to being more electronic, not completely electronic, yes. I'm sorry, yeah, is that okay? Yeah. Thank you.
In-house, or would it be you facilitating that process?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and it's a combination. It's experience. Getting Joe Serrera. I mean, you're northern. You're isolated. Your ability to access like the U of T or Georgian College, or the people who do have records management courses, is a bit limited, but they're all online. I told Brian that there's a Records Management Association that has courses, and there's the Association for Image and Information Management, which has better courses. They have them structured at the basic level. This is what it's about. This is, you know, you need to get involved and you want to be an expert. They're all online. They're all certified. They're all examined. The only thing you have to do is go to an exam center to take them, but they're excellent, and that's a really good way to do it. Plus, I think visiting. The records management community is more than willing to share information, particularly municipalities. I tell people, most organizations will share information about successes, but municipalities will always share information about failures. They do. You get together with organizations and they'll say, don't try that. We tried it. We screwed it up. And that's a great thing. So it's a very collegial aspect, environment. And so one of the things about Brian going down to, or Joe rather, going down to the Simcoe County area is that he'll start to get a network of people he can call on and ask about practical things that apply to municipalities, but there is a lot of online training, and I think Brian's probably providing for some of that in his budget so that Joe can gain that experience. It doesn't have to travel to go. It's all very, very good, very good. And it's monitored. It's not just finish the course and say you finished it. You get certifications and everything. Okay?
Well, if there's no other questions from council, I will say thank you, Mr. Roche.
Thank you very much for your time. And thanks for letting, I told Brian, I just love coming up here. I think I'm your biggest tourist fan right now, telling people about how much fun it is up here. I'm enjoying it. And I was here in the winter too, so there you go.
Very
Thanks.
good. Well, thanks for that. We won't be insulted if you walk out of the room right now either, so. You're, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's always like that.
Okay, we're- Before we get into the next part of the meeting, and just while everybody's still here, thanks for staff. There's a big, good turnout tonight. Thank you for coming out. And I wanted to say, I think it was at a special council meeting when Councillor Curlew, we received the news of her election as third vice president of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. So at an open council meeting, I'd like to say congratulations, Councillor Curlew, on behalf of our council. With that in mind, we'll move on to items requiring separate discussion. 2, 3, 4, 11, 12, starting with item 2. Speed reduction zone, First Avenue adjacent to Sioux Mountain School, that council authorizes the passing of bylaw number 39-18, being a bylaw to reduce the speed limit from 50 to 40 kilometers per hour on those portions of First Avenue adjacent to Sioux Mountain Public School. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Curlew, seconded by Councillor Fenlon. Discussion. I think Councillor Timpson, you lifted it. We'll start with you.
Yeah, I don't see where it's designated where the 40 will start and where it will stop, but I think it should be that entire First Avenue, because you do have a very precarious hill there, and you have a bus stop at the, just at King Street there, and there have been complaints from the residents that the traffic has been very fast zipping past there. So I would like to see that 40 kilometers for the entire street.
CIO, who would be speaking to this? Mr. Jewell? Yep. Maybe you could speak to the exact definition for Councillor Timpson of the area.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, the concern that was brought forward was in the vicinity of the school, implementing a 40-kilometer-hour speed reduction zone on all of First Avenue. It's council wanted to consider it, so I wouldn't recommend it. It's not as presented. It was presented this way because that was how it was brought forth by a member of the public, and it's also a replication of the speed zone reduction that we implemented on 8th Avenue and West Plainfield Road adjacent to Sacred Heart School. So that works very well. There's no other street reduction. I think that if council wanted to discuss that, that would be up to council.
Councillor Southall?
I drive it every day, morning and afternoon. I think the parameters are great, and it addresses a situation that, and I appreciate your comment about the crosswalk, because it goes to nowhere. And so it's well-written, and I support your report.
Further comments, Councillor? Councillor Timpson?
I would like to see the 40 kilometers go farther south down First Avenue, because they're just going to start to speed up right at Fuller. And you've got that precarious hill there that I spoke with the CAO about it, and a resident has contacted me several times about that. The cars just come speeding right down there, and you cannot see what's just down from that hill. And you've got a bus stop right at just above King Street there. So I think we would be remiss not to make that 40 all the way down. I mean, agree with everything else in the report. It's just that I don't think it's long enough.
Council? So I guess one way to do it is I'll call the vote and see if it's approved as written. All in favor? Carried. Item 3, 2018 Municipal Accommodation Tax Stakeholders Engagement Meeting. The council authorizes, thanks Councillor Forbes, you're okay. The council authorizes the passing of bylaw number 41-18, being a bylaw to impose municipal accommodation tax on the purchase of transit accommodation in the municipality of Sioux Lookout. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Fanlon, seconded by Councillor Southall. And before we go to discussion, I think there are members of the public here who may wish to speak to this. We'll do the discussion at the council table first, and then we'll come to the public if there is anybody here that wishes to speak. So, council? Councillor Southall? Yeah.
I was going to talk to Christie privately, and then I thought that probably everybody wanted to hear answers to these questions. So I am to believe from this report that the hospital, hostel, et cetera, are exempt from this tax. Is that correct or not?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, correct?
And we are looking at basically, hypothetically, 15, 20% of the tax that would be collected would be all that we would be able to collect, and that would be from tourists or business people coming into the community? I don't
Can you
know
explain that? Can you
Yeah.
explain that a bit more? Because it would be 4% of what the accommodations were.
I realize that, but of the total hotel, RV park, et cetera, what would be the percentage, like, roughly? Like, we heard 15, we've heard 20% of it would actually be tourism, the rest would be like health-related, education-related, et cetera. Is that, I mean, I'm just going rough.
Well, through you, Mayor Lawrence, if I understand what you're saying, any accommodation that someone was renting, say a motel room, they would be paying that 4% tax, whether it was for medical reasons or whatever the reason would be, unless they were staying in an actual hostel. Is that what I'm kind of
So are you
confused.
trying to get an idea of how much is southern tourism coming in, how much is health, and how much is education?
I-
Yeah. I don't,
I don't have that percentage.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, just to clarify, you're assuming that some people staying for, let's take a hotel, for example, may be exempt because of their reason for stay?
Yeah.
That's incorrect.
Oh, okay. That's not
It's,
what
the tax is against the accommodation of the room regardless of the purpose of
Okay.
stay.
Okay, then what I read in the report, I misunderstood. Okay.
Well, that was been the perception, because a hostel, under its definition, it's not like the hostel, right? Would be like, it could be like a youth hostel, that type of, traveling hostels that people
Okay,
stay.
okay, I got you, okay.
Yeah, the term.
Okay.
Councillor Timpson.
Yeah, I think we really should be looking at the effect on the small business people here, and if we can just tax the hotels and perhaps start at 2%, I would feel comfortable for this. I'm not comfortable with the taxing of the small motels and the bed and breakfasts and the resorts, or the fishing resorts. I think that it's very complicated too, how the fishing lodges charge, and I think it would be we would be defeating our whole purpose if we went that route.
Councillor Bath.
Sort of where I was going, I actually was going to suggest a friendly amendment. I don't know if it's the time to do it or not, but my friendly amendment would deal with, under the application section, line 2, if we completely took out the last line in there and just said accommodation for a continuous period of 30 days or less provided in a hotel, motel, motor hotel, lodge, or inn, that's the end of it. Leave out bed and breakfast, leave out all the small stuff. That covers hotels, motels. It completely exempts the tourist resorts, and I think that's what we're trying to do. So that was the other one, and we could probably even add under the exemptions, as still part of a friendly amendment, just add one more under following H, and call it accommodations provided in an establishment that operates on a seasonal basis, or something like that. I think if we did that, we would solve all the problems with it. The hotels and motels seem to be in favor of it. And
So,
I think
sorry, can you just, what page were you on for the?
I'm on in the bylaw. Just a minute, is that the bylaw? Yeah, I'm in the bylaw.
Yep, under the
Page
application section?
6, under the application. And it's item number 2 in there.
So you're suggesting, sorry, hotel, motel, motor hotel,
Lodge and inn. Leave those words in. I think they all mean basically the same thing.
so I worry about the word lodge. I think you're trying to exempt the purely sort of like the summer tourist lodges. So the word lodge-
We'd probably need a definition on that. I'm looking at a lodge as differently. I look in Dryden, for example, they have Riverview Lodge. It's a lodge, it's a hotel. So you call it whatever you like, but it's a hotel. And I think that's the same thing. Say Forest Inn is an inn, there's still hotels or motels. And maybe we need some clarification on the definitions. But I think if we do that, we completely eliminate all the concerns that are with it. I'm trying to tax bed and breakfast and whatever those ones you email into. The internet
Airbnb
connection,
or Airbnb.
Airbibs or whatever the heck they're called. Trying to tax those folks is going to be impossible. So,
Councillor Southall?
I think we're imposing a lot of responsibility on all of the hotels, resorts, etc. They're going to have to revamp their accounting or invoicing systems. They're going to have to keep track of municipal taxes. They're going to have to remit to the municipality. I mean, we're asking them to do a lot. If it's going to be for 2%, well then forget it. I mean, if we're not going to go for 4% and make it worthwhile, then why impose this on them in the first place? And I don't know. I'm really torn between whether we want to go here or not.
So just, I think in the discussion we had a meeting or two ago, with the nature of the way the province has set this up, we have to involve an outside agency, right? And that was the thought at the time was Chamber of Commerce, and they would receive benefit from this tax. And my understanding was that they were going to commit some of at least their first year to help if we're talking, and I believe what Councillor Bath is suggesting is 6 hotels or so, whatever it is, 5, exempting essentially the out of the urban core lodges, tourist lodges, etc. You're down to really the hotels, motels in town?
yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
So with that, then I think with that suggestion, and also I think that the way it was set up is that half the funds from the tax go through the chamber, and what they had said, they would use the funding in the first to help the impacted businesses develop the software, et cetera, transition to the tax.
Okay, then I'm not sure I'm clear on this, because what I received in another email was that it was not up to the TIC or whoever to receive the 50% to designate how the funds were going to be spent. Now, maybe I misread something.
Maybe
here,
ask the
but-
treasurer for that. Yeah.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, that's correct. So that money that whichever organization gets the 50%, they will enter into an agreement with the municipality, and in the agreement you can state how the funds will be allocated and what they will use the funds for. I would recommend that if we're going to implement the percent, like say for 2018, whatever we get at the end of the year, we say they're getting $100,000. We say to them, okay, present us with a budget as to how you're going to spend this money, and then council review it to approve the budget before the funds are allocated to anybody. So we have to ensure that the funds are being allocated for tourism purposes.
Councillor Bath.
Just so I let you guys get away with that, but I made a friendly amendment to change it, and it sort of wandered away from that. I guess we need to vote on or either have the mover and second to accept the friendly amendment or not. And if we don't, then we go back to the main discussion.
So I believe help me, sorry.
Clarification, through you, Mayor Lawrence. So, Councillor Bath, are you suggesting to maintain the 4% within the confines of your friendly amendment?
The only thing I changed was that paragraph 2 and adding adding one more under the exemptions list. It's the only things I changed in my friendly amendment. I think it's a
So
friendly.
after in, you would have period. Following in, you would have period.
Following in, I have a period, exactly.
And I guess my friendly amendment is that definition of what qualifies as a lodge, an inn, et cetera. I think we need to be very clear what's included and what's not included. And these are generic terms, and some of the things that we are going to, I think we'd like to exclude. I don't want to name particular businesses, but some of the ones that I think we want to exclude are called so-and-so lodge. So how do we handle that? CIO? Yep.
Through your, Mayor Lawrence, as a suggestion, perhaps you do that through the exemption. So one of the exemptions would be, if, with the right terminology, tourist outfitter or resource-based, the term that they actually use. So they can call themselves a lodge, a camp, whatever, but do it through the exemption. And then because if you look up the definition of lodge or inn, it's very similar to a hotel, motel, like the actual definition is there. But just so we don't get a play on words, if you will.
So
do it through the exemption.
before I ask about the friendly amendment, Councillor Bat, I'm just wondering what the appetite of council is. Do we want to say, give direction to staff to take this back, to rework so that we're clear and get it right the first time? If there's a general consensus on council, where we got Councillor Southall?
The second part of the amendment said to add it into the exemptions, accommodations provided in an establishment that operates on a seasonal basis.
Okay.
And I think that pretty much covers it.
Although there's some that operate on a seasonal basis for part and then do other things.
I think
Councillor
we're gonna
Southall?
have to be specific here. And I think it's gonna have to go down to, I don't want to get into this, but it's going to have to be specified. Whatever, this hotel, this hotel, this hotel, if more come on, we're gonna have to adjust it at that point in time, but we have to be, because I mean, so what we're gonna have is somebody's gonna change, next week they're gonna say, okay, well, I'm no longer a resort, I'm a lodge, or I'm not a lodge, I'm gonna be a campground, or we're gonna have to, it's a can of worms.
Yeah, I think we need to be careful about getting it right. I think also we need to, this is the type of taxation that we've been asking for. We have residential and commercial property tax, that's what we have. And the province has now given municipalities the ability, and a municipality like Sioux Lookout who has no industrial tax base, this is our opportunity, and a lot of the taxation, this accommodation tax would be being paid by the levels of government that should be paying for some things in our community, by the federal and provincial governments. I think we would be remiss not to take advantage of this, as so many municipalities are. And we're already paying when we go to Toronto destination management fee. We're paying it in Niagara Falls, paying 38%, I think, in Las Vegas. When we go there, that allows them, Winnipeg is 5%. So my sense from council, from previous discussions, is we do want to do something, but I think we need to do it and get it right the first time, and not leave a bunch of uncertainty. So, back to your friendly amendment, Councillor Bath, I don't disagree with it, but I also think that there's a few open-ended and a bit of vagueness there that needs to be nailed down. That's my opinion before we go to this. So, one of the things I'm going to suggest we do is call the vote on this, and I'm hoping it would be defeated, and then we give direction to staff to go back and do some with the direction that we're getting here, to give staff direction to bring it back. Councillor Bath.
Yeah, I guess the concern I have is that it's, right now, the operators, resort operators, tourist operators, still think they're included. I mean, obviously they think they're included, that's why they're here.
Well, they are at this point, but and as part of this consultation and discussion, this is what it's about, right? They are included, and I guess we could defeat it now and give the direction to staff to bring it back, and defeating the motion as it stands. Mr. Clerk, give me some advice here in terms of procedure.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence. So yes, you could defeat the motion, or if the mover and seconder simply withdraw the motion, then it's just taken off the table, and then you can still provide direction to staff, whichever way you prefer.
Okay. All right. Councillor Southall.
I'm going to make a suggestion that I think maybe Councillor Bath, I think the intent is to remove seasonal operators.
Not intended, I actually said that.
Pardon?
I said that.
Yeah.
I just said that. I think the intent is to remove the seasonal operators.
But there are some seasonal operators who also operate through the winter in a different methodology, is my understanding.
In a minor.
I'm just worried about getting it right and.
Exactly, and that's what I said. It has to be done, and that's why I think we almost have to specifically say this place,
Yeah.
this place, this place are subject to it, and the rest are exempt.
And I think we would give staff that direction. Is it either that direction, or is there a way around that doesn't name specific businesses that we can do it? Yeah.
And maybe there is.
Yeah. CAO?
Just for an example, if I can bother Christie just to read that one excerpt from Kenora's, just to give you an idea what, how others have handled the same thing.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, for Kenora's, they stated in there, every tent or trailer site supplied by a campground, tourist camp, or trailer park is how they define theirs. There's a lot more different ones that were exempt in there, which, through you, Mayor Lawrence, if we could even bring the bylaw back stating that this is, you only want hotels, and we could ensure that it states that only hotels. It would be under tourist camps, yeah. Seasonal, yeah. We could, yeah.
I'm just, yeah.
That's why we're asking, because we have a very good feeling you're going to be sending us back to do this. So that's why we want to throw it on, ask the questions now.
Yeah. So Councillor Fanlon.
I'd like to see this happen. What John said is exempting the tourist operators. But I have a concern that the government didn't give us this program, didn't hand it down to us not to do something with it. And we're walking a fine line, I think, with government grants from the government in the future, because we've asked for some more areas for taxation. And I think we got to do it right, like John says, and make sure that we don't leave anybody out, that we can get the tax off of it. And some hotels in town do support tourists. Tourists come here to stay in a motel because it's cheaper. And for them. So what if the motels come along and say, well, I got a certain amount of tourists that I'm supporting.
Yeah, I don't think that it's the nature of the business, and also the nature of some of the information that came to light during the course of this that I think is very relevant. But I think the tourists that stay in hotels is no different than us going to Winnipeg and being a tourist in a Winnipeg hotel, which is essentially what we're doing. I think the tourism that would have been caught by a really broad net out there on whether it be houseboats or in seasonal lodges or outpost camps is not the tourist market that we were looking at. I agree. I think we need to do something, but I think we need to do it right. And I think that's what Councillor Bath was trying to do with the friendly amendment. I'm just concerned that the friendly amendment, I think staff needs to go back and hearing if council gives me head nods after that they've got direction to go back. Treasurer.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, I just have a question regarding the bed and breakfast and the Airbnbs. Is this something else that would have to be considered when you are doing this? It's just a motel room or a bed and breakfast. It's similar. So just a thought for you.
Councillor Timpson.
And there was a comment made at one of the meetings, I think the 7th of May, about how this would affect the Sioux Lookout First Nations Health Authority and their costs. Now, to my knowledge, they aren't footing the bill. It's Health Canada, and Health Canada just pays as they are billed. But I think we should look at that, just explore that to make sure that we aren't going to be pushing them over the edge. I don't think we are, but I think we need to confirm that was expressed at one of the meetings.
Councillor Bath.
Yeah, to speak to Treasurer's comment, I agree with that. I think we have to strike them from this bylaw because it's just too hard to enforce it. It's impossible to enforce it. I'm not saying we should strike not trying to find some way to tax them, but we shouldn't include it in this bylaw. You know, if there's some way to, obviously they're a competitor to the hotels and the motels, so they should be, something should happen to deal with that. We can't be taxing the hotels and not taxing these people, but we need to find a different mechanism. I don't think this is the mechanism to do it. We either maybe do it through property taxes by changing their status. If you become commercial from residential, you probably not going to be renting too many rooms. So, you know, maybe that's the way to do it. I don't think this is the bylaw to do it in.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, just so you know that Kenora did implement a tax for them. They did hotels, motels, bed and breakfasts, and Airbnbs
At what percentage?
at 4%.
Perhaps when you come back, as I suspect you will be coming back with a new report, you could make that distinction and give us the option to include or not include a category there, without making it too complex. Or we're thinking, is council thinking just at this time too complex given the size of the bed and breakfast and just to be added later? Yeah, okay. Okay.
That's my, I mean, we're talking like 2, 3, 4 rooms or something like that, you know, compared to whatever, 20, 30, 50.
60, 100,
You know,
yeah.
yeah. Anyhow.
Okay. So, council, tell me if I'm wrong here. I'm going to suggest, and Councillor Bath, forgive me for not calling your friendly amendment to the mover and seconder just yet. That the council redirects or directs staff to take the report back in the light of this conversation, be as specific as you can be without naming business names, and if you have to name business names, name business names, that we are talking about essentially what I will call hotels in town, to have the 4% MAT tax applied to them. Is that the direction? Councillor Crew, Councillor Fanlon, Councillor Bath. This is not a vote. It's just the vote will happen if it's.
I think we could pass this and get rid of it and add a couple more exemptions rather than drag it out with staff again. That'll be the third time, I think.
But I think I think it's a significant. You know, we're talking. We don't have many other form. We have property tax, residential, commercial, and now we have a MAT tax. So I think it's worth, before we implement it, you know, having all the consultations we've had and the input we've had, and take our time. And I appreciate getting things done, but I also think. So can I say we have consensus on that? Does staff have enough direction? And either mover and seconder, Mr. Clerk, I can just ask them to withdraw their motion, the motion that's on the table. Mover and seconder were?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, Councillors Fenelon and Southall.
Before I do that, I want to, once it's removed, it's off the table for discussion, so the public would not be invited to talk. So it's going to be removed. I'll just, in the light of what's being said at the council table, is there anything that any members of the public would like to add to that? So please rise and state your name and. I just hope you're to the point of the municipal accommodation tax. That's what we're discussing, not the mill rate or other things. So that's what's on the table. Municipal accommodation tax is what's on the agenda for discussion. Yeah, please, yeah.
Using impacts assessed value for 2018 and the 2017 mill rate, our personal businesses will increase 3.24% this year. In 2019, they'll increase 3.14%. In 2020, they'll increase over 3%. Aren't you getting enough from us? I mean, I don't mean you personally. Sorry if I say you. I think we're paying enough taxes. And I think it would be nice if maybe we saw a little more management of how our taxes are spent. Because you're not supplying sewer and water to us. You don't supply garbage pickup. We do our own recycling methods. And I just think this is unfair to us as an industry. And the other thing I want to do is tell you that according to the Bulletin and Jason Bailey, the tax increases were 5.5 in 2014, 10.5 in 2015, and 4.1 in 2016. I don't understand these excessive taxes when the CPI was 1.5 in 16, 1.3 in 17, and it's 2.2 in May, and that's due to the increase in fuel taxes. Someone said that they're going to put the 4% tax on top of the accommodation, which includes the HST. The only people that do tax on tax is the federal government when they sell you fuel oil. So why are we telling people that they're going to pay 4% on $80 plus the HST? Mr. Calvin Salvo stated the municipality is likely to receive equivalent of more than a 3% increase in extra impact assessments, just told you what ours would be, is getting about a 5% tax rate increase equivalent in policing cost savings, put 100,000 of its hydro dividend into reserves, and had a surplus to work with of over $100,000. Councillor Sprinthal also stated we basically have somewhere between 10 and 11% more to spend in 2018. I'm wondering when we're going to see fiscal responsibility. I've got to take a lot of responsibility for paying my bills. I wish that this community would as well. We currently have over 130 people who earn their wages in the medical field, the security sector, at education and financial institutions, and even municipal staff who live in other communities due to the high taxes here. These local salary earners are not a captive audience, and neither are our tourists. In closing, I looked up the impact rules and regulations for a MAT tax, and it says here, and I quote, when exploring destination marketing programs. So, Chamber is not a destination marketing program. We do all the destination marketing for our own resorts. So unless the Chamber is going to be a destination marketing program, they're not entitled to this money. So, I repeat, when exploring destination marketing programs or MAT tax options, municipal and tourism partners may wish to consider all factors that will ensure their regions remain competitive tourism destinations. You talk about Kenora, they have a whole different tourism destination. They have the draw of 700,000 people, who I might say fill all of that because it's only 2.5 hours away from Winnipeg. The people that come to us know they have to drive 5 hours. To continue, we encourage municipalities to work together with their tourism partners and to consider potential impacts on the tourism industry and consumers when making decisions about whether or how to implement a tax on transient accommodation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak? Sorry, would you like to speak? Yeah. State your name and. Thank you.
My concern is, when I said to a couple tourists the other day that they're going to implement this 4% tax, they feel like they're being nickel and dimed. And they don't feel that they're probably not going to come back because it won't launch process, which has gone up. stay for 6 or 7 days and fish out of the motel, go to different lakes. And their concern is that this extra money, because of the price of gas and travel and, you know, fishing license and boat launch, that they're probably not gonna come back. So if you're gonna say to the tourist operator, okay, they don't have to pay this tax because they're a tourist operator, they're owning a camp. Well, I'm a tourist operator too because I'm getting people to come and fish out of my motel. So I'm like a lodge too, feed them breakfast. And my other concern is with the health authority. Do you realize how much business comes from the health authority in the motels in Seward? Do you know? Do you have any idea?
Yes, we're not entering into a debate on that. It has been discussed at the council table. Thank you.
Okay, because it's lots of money.
Mhm.
And people come out of the north to stay in the motels from the winter roads, and they've only got enough money to spend on a motel, like barely. And then you're gonna charge them another 4%. My tourism business is probably only 10% in a year. The rest is the north. And medical and contractors. And contractors are always looking for a deal too. And then my last thing to say is, my person that's sitting at that desk, who is not me all the time, has to take the flak from the customer. We already have people say, do you have a deal? And I'm the cheapest in town. Do you have a deal? Is there a contractor? Is there a CN rate? I'm trying to cover my taxes and my bills. So I've got to add this, is it going to stop people from coming? So those are my comments. I would have liked to have seen the report that you guys got from the meeting. Was that
It's online, I believe. It's available. Yeah, it's available online. Yeah.
report that you got?
Yeah.
Doing that Panel 7?
Oh, yeah. That's not.
You-
Yeah, it's part.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, the report that was submitted to council is the report that was put together after the meeting on May 7th.
Thank you. Anybody else from? Yep. Anybody else in the public? And then I'll come back to the council table and ask the mover and seconder if they wish to withdraw the motion. Mover, seconder. Motion is withdrawn. Discussion is over at this time, and staff have direction. Item 4, the keeping of chickens. The council directs staff how to proceed regarding the keeping of chickens within the municipality of Sioux Lookout pursuant to staff recommendations and report number RP 2018-62 dated June 20th, 2018. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Fanlon, seconded by Councillor Curlew. Sorry, Councillor Forbes, I should have waited for you. So, keeping of chickens is on the floor. Discussion, council. Councillor Timpson.
Yeah, I'm happy to see that this is moving forward. The only concern that I had was the allowing of roosters. I think we'd be getting into some trouble if we carte blanche allowed roosters, but I do think that there are some properties where roosters would be quite fine. And is there any way in which a person could apply for an exemption to that, for example, if they had no neighbors whatsoever? But I think generally speaking, there should be a rule that there be no roosters. I'd say whoever has the roosters now can keep them, grandfather them in. But the rooster issue does concern me because that's been a lot of what people have been saying, that they don't want roosters waking them up in the morning. So,
Councillor Bath.
Okay, I think I said the same thing at the last two meetings now. I'm probably going to repeat myself again, is that I'm in favor of people having chickens. Start with that statement. I believe we have a bylaw in place. It's bylaw 50-06. It's the keeping of animals within the municipality of Sioux Lookout that deals with, chicken is an animal. It deals with chickens. I believe what's happened is people have taken advantage of the fact that we haven't been enforcing it, and they've gone from having no chickens to 10 chickens to 20 chickens without, there's no rule for it. There has to be a rule. I'm suggesting we modify the animal bylaw to bring in chickens, and if we use the same numbers that are in here. Now, what my suggestion would be is that the number in the animal bylaws, you can have 4. So I can have 4 dogs, 4 cats, there's a whole bunch of stuff I can't have, but I can have 4 dogs and 4 cats. And nobody does anything about it. Nobody worries about the noise. Nobody worries unless somebody complains. So the bylaw is there. And in the bylaw there's also deals with odor, deals with noise. So in my opinion, everything is included. I think what we need to do is allow the same number of chickens as we would dogs or cats, which is 4. And that's everywhere. Trying to separate urban from rural is ridiculous, because we can't do it. We have to draw a line, and surely the heck there'll be an argument there. But what we need to also have in place is an exemption, so that just like we do with our committee of adjustment, if we want to have a zoning law, a zoning change, we have to ask for an exemption, and we can get it. I know it sounds like it's going to be a real nuisance for somebody to come in and talk to council where they want, instead of 4 chickens, they want 10 chickens. But I think it's not like everybody in town is going to do it. There's going to be a few people going to do it, and a few people already have probably a lot of chickens. People who have a large group of flock of chickens would probably could apply for the exemption right away. And if they don't apply for the exemption, then I would suggest that they would fall back to the 4. And if you go over 4, then you're in contravention of the bylaw. I mean, I'm sure it's not that simple, but I think if we could rewrite the bylaw a little bit with a few words. I don't want to add chickens. I want to add chickens and fowl, or just fowl, because I don't think we want to be doing this again, or the next council doing it again. But I think it could be all done quite easily, and I agree with Councillor Timpson. If roosters in town are probably out of the question. Roosters in the rural, why not? Go ahead. So that would be part of the exemption policy. As it stands, there'd be no roosters, but when you come in with an exemption and request council to look at it, you could ask for roosters. The existing bylaws cover noise, cover disagreeable odor. Setbacks for coops may need to be built into the exemptions. That's hard to say. We have no setbacks for my dogs, so we need to make sure we're not making a molehill. It wouldn't be a molehill, but out of a bunch of chickens. So I think we can do this very easily. We can satisfy everybody, and well, that's a dream. But we can do it without any effort. I would suggest that when they come in for an exemption, maybe they have to pay a $20 fee to go above the 4 chickens. Big deal.
Councillor Southall, then Councillor Fenlon.
Totally agree with both Councillor Timpson and Bath. I had 7 acres of property, and I was still bothered by a rooster, so I would like to see roosters banned. I think if you want to subdivide a rural property, you need 1 hectare or 2.5 acres. You've got 2.5 acres, apply for an exemption and have as many chickens as you want. You're not going to bother anybody. And anyhow, my 2 cents worth.
Councillor Fenlon.
I agree somewhat with them, but there's people out there that have them. And how do you deal with some of the problems that we have currently, which I think sort of brought this bylaw to council at the time. I don't feel we've dealt enough with those issues there, and we need to look at that. More than 3 or 4 must be oversight of the neighbor's view, sort of thing. I'll tell you one thing, that we used to have a chicken we had 10 chickens on not quite an acre, right? And the rooster was waking me up, so long for the rooster. But we still ended up having to have a rooster again because some of the hens get superior and they start picking on other ones. When they start drawing blood, then the bird is going to die because the rest of them are going to go after them too. So we had that just about 2 months ago. So I ended up with another rooster to keep everybody in line. So those are the issues that the way I look at it, and I've got 10 acres of property, and they're out of sight and out of mind of the neighbors. There's no neighbors that are close enough to me. So my idea is to 3 or 4 must be out of sight of the neighbor's view. Keeping of more 10 requirements, a maximum half an acre or more, with requirement of a setback from the neighbors to deal with the issue of noise and smells and stuff like that. And ours, you don't get the smell if you're looking after it. Laurel uses it all for compost, and she can't get enough of it.
Councillor Curlew.
Though I don't disagree with the sentiments that have been expressed so far, I'm in support of the report and the recommendations that staff have put forward. I mean, in terms of what John had talked about, rural and urban, and there's an obvious rural component to Sioux Lookout, and there's an obvious urban component. So I think making sure that there is a certain amount specific to areas is important, and that's expressed here in the staff recommendation.
Councillor Fanlon.
One more comment. My sister was down, and she lives in Markham, next door to Toronto, and she said Toronto is allowing chickens within the city bylaw, within the city. So I don't know if we can look at what they're allowing and what they're not to suffice the town area where there's more chickens in town than there is out of town, I think.
I'm assuming when you say they're allowing it with limitations, rules, regulations, et cetera. Yeah, just one of my concerns is the urban-rural definition is fine, but somebody can have a 10-acre lot in the rural, and the neighbor might have half an acre. It's possible. I think you could, and if the chickens are kept close to the property line, and both houses are close to the property line, it's the same as the urban. The chickens and the mess or whatever, if it's untended, are there. So I think there needs to be some. I'm very concerned about some of the concerns that were brought forward by people who don't have chickens, that are being impacted by people with chickens. And I think most people with chickens, there's many people with chickens and many people adjacent to people with chickens, and there's no problem. It's when the problems arise, do we have the teeth to deal with it, and can we avoid the problems in the first place? And I don't think that right now we're satisfactorily addressing the concerns that were brought up of and this is in the rural, of a neighbor who had chickens and had tens of chickens, not a handful of chickens, tens of chickens, and mounds of manure, and it was upwind of the adjacent property, and they were both close to the property line. And how do you deal with that? It's the rural. So I think we need to make sure that we're flexible in allowing the keeping of chickens, but there needs to be, and I don't disagree with Councillor Bath in terms of the existing animal control bylaw is really what it is, right? Is that what it's called, John? Yep.
It's called the bylaw to regulate the keeping of animals within the municipality of Sioux Lookout. And
if there are sufficient, can I say teeth in that bylaw? I'm not sure if hen's teeth are hard to find. But I'm a bit reluctant yet to say that this is ready to go in terms of protection of neighbors. Councillor Bath.
Yeah, I agree. I think the bylaw needs, before it's actually passed, the bylaw would need to be looked at. I mean, it was a suggestion that we could tune up this bylaw and use it rather than trying to write a new one. Dealing with the piles of chicken poop and stuff that isn't cleaned up, that's already in our bylaws. that shouldn't have happened. Like our bylaw officer should have gone there and made them clean it up. That should never happen. So that's our fault as a municipality. That's not the fault of necessarily, but certainly the neighbor get punished by it. And the person who was doing it should have been probably charged under the bylaw. Because that's allowing waste, and it's very clear, even in here, it's very clear that you can't do that. It's a public nuisance section of this bylaw. Public nuisance, and it is no offensive odors or unreasonable disruption of the comfort of neighbors. It's in the bylaw. So we just aren't doing it. So I think we don't, I think if we can fine tune it and tune this up, Brian can tune this up, we know who's gonna do it. And maybe that's how it has to happen, or that's how I certainly see it happen.
So I've got Councillor Fenlon, Councillor Forbes, Councillor Timpson.
The chickens, how are we going to deal with moving forward? Our rural areas are closer to the Sulikout, are getting built up, and we allow chickens here, we allow chickens there, and people are subdividing their properties. If they got water, like you go down Forest Drive or something like that, they got sewer and water down there, and they can split their lots up, like lots. You know, and it's crowding in, and somebody moves in, oh, well, I don't like that, I don't like the noise of the chickens, or I don't like the smell of it, and stuff like that, right? People should be made aware that the bylaw is there before they're buying property and trying to subdivide it and deal with it. So,
Councillor Forbes?
I guess I don't disagree with the rooster aspect. I guess I'm a little bit confused. My understanding that this whole thing was kicked off because the complaint was lodged and there wasn't a specific bylaw in place to deal with the complaint. But now I'm hearing that that's not true. For whatever reason, bylaw decided that they weren't going to deal with the complaint. So I guess I'm trying to figure out why we've gone through this entire exercise when, as Councillor Bath has just pointed out.
I might take first, then Brian will
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're right. There is no. We've been talking about this chicken bylaw for quite a while now. But this talks about animals, and it doesn't say that chickens are prohibited. So in my mind, that means they're allowed. And obviously, people think they're allowed because they have them. So there's lots of things you can't have. You can't have opossums. You can't have kangaroos. You can't have gorillas. So
Right. No,
the whole list that you can't have.
I get that.
There's a list of fines that you get fined for if you do it. It doesn't mention chickens in the fines, which is easy enough to add in there, I'm quite sure. But the fact is, everything else is in here. So that's where I came from with that. Ryan and I have had a discussion.
Mr. Clerk, would you like to address Councillor Forbes?
Thank you, Mayor Lawrence, and through you. When the issue was initially conceived or beginning to deal with in the early days, just to clarify a couple of things. One, I don't think there was ever a suggestion from staff that a standalone chicken bylaw be created. That's never been on the table from staff's perspective. It was always the intent of staff to, if council wanted to deal with this, and it still is, that existing bylaws be amended to provide for it. One of the challenges early on with respect to how it was going to be enforced had to do with how the animals were being kept. As you read the animal control bylaw, it's very pet-centric. The argument, especially in the case of the early complaints, dealt with keeping chickens for agricultural purposes, which the animal control bylaw doesn't speak to. So the animal control bylaw can be amended to deal with the keeping of chickens. What we require from council is exactly how you want it amended so that we can deal with it. So I agree somewhat with Councillor Bath, but the bylaw as it's currently written, in my opinion, bylaw 50-06, the animal control bylaw, is not where it needs to be at this point in time to deal with the keeping of chickens. It would need to be amended. Indeed.
Councillor Southall. Oh, no, sorry, Councillor Timpson, you were next, yeah. Do you want us to, yep, certainly. But I could, I'll just take a health break here for 2 minutes, how's that? Declare a health break and
And that's one of the problems with the provincial bylaw, and that's what I was saying to Brian earlier, or somebody. I said, if people are taking a
it's right in the Constitution, the bylaws. Anybody, as soon as it's known that there's a public provincial office, has to resign.
Okay, so can you clarify that? Because I don't think people realize that, that that's what it was.
I would have, if anybody wants to talk about it, I would have clarified it.
Yeah.
I only, back to the council table. We're in the midst of the keeping of chickens discussion. And the next up on table was Councillor Timpson.
Yeah. I think we need to also keep in mind why we are looking at chickens in Sioux Lookout. And it essentially is because we're interested in food security, we're interested in addressing environmental issues, and we are wanting to accommodate to who we are in Sioux Lookout, which is a combination of rural and urban. I had the opportunity to visit two different residences. One is a fairly extensive residence that has a operation of chickens, and another is backyard chickens in a home, which mostly they were pets, well, with some eggs. And both, I mean, what I learned is if they're looked after well, they do not smell, they do not make noise, and I think it's perfectly feasible and advisable that we have some mechanism where we can be encouraging people to take on their own food security. And, you know, I think it could be incorporated in the animal bylaw, but possibly a separate section that deals with and specifies that we're not talking about pets here, we're talking about food security. In some way reflect that we're not talking about pets, but it's something else. And again, I'm quite happy with the conditions that are outlined here. Other than the rooster issue, I think we have to be careful of that because roosters will cause difficulties, and you don't need roosters apparently. Although the chicken experts here could speak to that.
Somebody's got to get out of bed in the morning.
Councillor Southall.
I totally agree with Councillor Timpson, except that all of this is happening because of one or two bad apples. And what we have to do is get something in place to be able to enforce the bad apples. 99% of what's going on is good. But there's 1% that's bad, and we have to have something, some clout, some claw to go and say, okay, you need to shape up here. That's
Councillor Fenlon.
I think Cal's right. We need some way to deal with the issues. And the only way the issue that I can see that somebody to deal with it would be the SPCA. And they can supersede your bylaws and stuff like that. If it's not sanitary for the chickens, or if they're being abused or stuff like that, call SPCA and they'll go check it. If it's not good living conditions or it's too cold for the chickens and, you know, stuff like that. So, I mean, obviously we got, like John said, we got enough in the animal bylaw, and it deals with messes around like dogs and stuff like that in the yards, affecting the neighbors, and we can't do nothing about it. We can do something about that, but we can't do much about the chickens. The mess that the chickens are made, because we're not into it. And we don't want to build on it. We're not, this isn't a job creation project. Call the SPCA, and they're around.
So, Council, I feel like we're in the same place we were with the previous motion, that I may be asking the mover and the seconder to withdraw the motion and direct staff. And I was remiss in not saying, CIO, and you could pass this on at your management meeting, thank the staff for the previous report, and it's all part of the process of getting it right, and the report was appreciated, and the work that went into it is appreciated, just as is this one. But I think part of the process is getting it right. So, Council, I'll do the same process about consensus head nod to possibly withdraw this motion, this report, looking at retooling it. Councillor Bath.
I don't think we need to withdraw it. I think that what's in here is good. All we really need to do is make sure that staff can revamp this.
What are you holding up, sorry?
The animal bylaw. If this can be tuned up, changed to make it inclusive of chickens, then we should just ask them to do that. To me, it's easy. I'm just going to scribble a couple of lines in there, but for Brian, it'll be a little tougher because he can read it. But I think if we, rather than withdraw it, because if we withdraw it, then we're coming back at it next month again, and it's gonna be the same thing. We won't have a decision. Now we'll have a bylaw to look at next time. We can have some friendly amendments. I can make a friendly amendment to his bylaw if I like, and we maybe can pass it right through next time around, just with updating this, or changing this, not updating it, changing it.
I
would
guess
prefer to do that than withdraw.
what I don't like about it is I feel it leaves the people who had legitimate complaints still with legitimate complaints, and we can do nothing about it.
But we can do something about it. We have the bylaws in place already. We just aren't doing anything about it.
Okay, Councillor Fenelon and then Councillor Southall.
One thing about the animal bylaw, and it states 4 of this, 4 of that, and that's not realistic if you got chickens. You know, to run chickens throughout the winter, they got their own body heat that you rely on some to create some heat. And our chicken coop's heated to luxury. It's about 10 or 12 degrees in there. So, but we got 9 chickens plus a rooster now, and it's the same, eh? We keep a cube heater in there, but if you got down to 4, it's just, you're gonna dump more heat in there, and stuff like that.
Councillor Southall?
I like everything that's in place, but there has to be more clout to deal with offenders. And other than that, I don't agree with the roosters. I think they're an annoyance, even with 10 acres of property. I mean, borrow one from Dryden for a week and take it back there when it beats up the hens or whatever. But I mean, they're annoying, even with 10 acres of property. You can still hear them. You can't have your windows open in the summertime. 5 o'clock in the morning, they're making a ruckus. I don't like that. But there has to be a little bit more clout to deal with offenders. And other than that, let's go.
Councillor Timpson.
But I don't agree with trying to ram it through tonight. I think after the fact, I think that staff might glean enough of what we are after tonight and come back and then.
Well,
Councillor Timpson.
yeah, the recommendation just says that council directs staff how to proceed regarding the keeping of chickens within the municipality, et cetera. So basically, we're not voting on anything. We're directing staff how to proceed. That's basically what the recommendation is.
Mr. Clerk, is that, would you?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, yes, that's the intent was to seek direction from council, and certainly council is providing direction to staff. So if council wishes to pass the resolution, you will have achieved your goal in providing direction to staff. So
And we wouldn't have changed the current situation?
There's absolutely nothing in the report that would change anything at this point. It would, with the discussion I've heard around the table this evening, I will also summarize the direction as I understand it, and then I would bring back an amended animal control bylaw and potentially other bylaws if necessary.
So are you saying you're prepared to summarize the discussion right now?
If you wish, I'd
That would be
pleased.
wonderful, thank you.
So in terms of direction to staff, what I have heard from council is that there, not exclusively, but generally, there is not a desire to permit roosters anywhere in Sioux Lookout. Sorry, going too far back. That bylaw 5006B amended to mirror the provisions for numbers of pets. So it would be permitting 4 chickens. If there's support among council for Councillor Bath's recommendations, we could also provide for the appeal process that he outlined in his comments, where people who want additional chickens beyond 4 would come to council through an appeal process. And that 5006, sorry, the animal control bylaw be sufficiently amended so that there is clout, there's teeth for enforcement purposes.
First Councillor Curlew and then Councillor Forbes.
An area of contention is if the current bylaw, 50 dash, is applicable and not 4, and those now who are above 4 and they want to go through the process of getting more, then technically they're under that provision where they could be harassed for having more than 4, and that's problematic. So how do we address that?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, my recommendation would be that when the bylaw is brought before council, that it include, so it can be passed, it can come into force on the day it's passed, whether that be July 18th, the next council meeting, but that it would take effect over a period of time, that it wouldn't take effect until whatever period of time council deems appropriate, whether that's 3 months or 6 months or whatever, to give people that time to come into compliance with what the new requirements are. And during that grace period, if you will, that would be the time where people who currently have numbers that exceed what's permitted would have that opportunity to come to council and apply for their exemptions.
Councillor Forbes. My only concern with that is, sorry if I'm, is come to council, and I just see that as, are there 16 people coming to council at different times, and is at the council? It seems a rather, I would like to think that the bylaws, the regulations, et cetera, had enough clarity that staff could deal with it, and only if there was an appeal of an appeal or something that would come to the council table. That would be my thought. That it seems like we're dragging council into the detail of, yeah, and who, so well, after that, I'll do Councillor Timpson, Councillor Forbes, but did you have a response there?
Yes, through you, Mayor Lawrence, yes. So the current animal control bylaw does have a process to request exemptions from the bylaw. Currently, that's administered by the bylaw enforcement manager. So we could continue that process for chickens and have the bylaw enforcement manager make that call, and then have a subsequent level of appeal, as you've suggested to Mayor, if the individual isn't pleased with the manager of bylaw enforcement, and then have it come to council. One thing I would like to get council's clarification on at this point is currently there is a $20 fee associated with the appeal process or exemption. Do you want that to remain, or do you want that to be taken out?
Well, personally, I think waive the $20 fee in that period. If it's 6 months or 12 months of grace, waive it then. But then after that, whatever period that is, 6 or 12 months, then it comes into play.
Give it back.
Councillor Timpson and then Councillor Forbes.
Yeah, I don't think it's realistic to say limit of 4 to apply across the municipality. There's 30, 40, 50 people that have chickens out there that are going to be coming to apply, and unless we have some very, very specific reasons to reject somebody, and we better know what we're doing when we need to know about chickens before we start exempting people and approving somebody for having 34 chickens. I think that's risky. I mean, again, the bylaw has got to, it's got to reflect why we're agreeing, why we want to have chickens, why we want food security in Sioux Lookout. Let's encourage it, not put barriers up.
I guess food security, if we had 4 cows, do we need 4 or 24 cows? What's the limit? That's food security, production of milk. I think, you know, if you're getting into that level of you're a farm, you need an agricultural zone. There's entirely different rules that apply. No, they're not, but I'm sure they are. And then there's other places that are not. Councillor Forbes? Oh, you withdraw? Okay, thank you. Councillor Fenlon.
I don't agree with the 4. I'd like to see something different on that, because if you want to do it for Sioux Lookout, sure, that's fine. But once you get out into the rural area where the lots are bigger, we we should be allowing more. I don't know how more, because I don't know how many chicken people out there have chickens in the rural area, and what do they have?
I think maybe, we put a minimum and maximum on it, that would, I guess I can't go 50%, John, you're shaking your head.
Start with 4.
That's right.
Start with 4, and then, and your exemptions take you up to whatever, 99 if you want.
It's not gonna
But-
cost you anything for the
No.
first 6 months.
So that's why I think 4 in your backyard in town is a reasonable number, so we don't have to start changing for everybody's backyards. And the people in the rural want more than 4, they know they can come and ask for an exemption, and they can get their numbers. If we start raising the number too high, you're gonna raise it, okay, it's 6 for the people on this block and 8 for the people on this block, I mean, that's just nuts. Start with 4, we can have 4 dogs and 4 cats, start with that, and then go with the exemptions. That's so easy.
Exemption simple.
That too.
All right, I'm going to ask you, staff, do you think you have enough direction?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, yes.
And now I'm going to ask, is there any members of the public, in light of the discussion that's gone on at the council table, would like to add any information at this point? Please stand and state your name. And
if possible, to make to council and to you, Mayor, a recommendation about, there is 2 types of chickens. You have your meat birds and you have your laying hens. Laying hens do not stink. If it's a stink issue and all that, meat birds stink from start. As soon as they hatch out of the egg, they stink. It's how they're built to grow. And there's poop, highly stinks. You can have 5 chickens, meat birds, across the street, and you'll be pretty much vomiting in this office. That's how bad it stinks. I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. I've had over 100 2 years ago, and they stink. They're tasty, but they stink. So if possible, make defer the 2 types of birds. And also, if possible, like I've got 2. I just received my 2 new chickens, and I don't want to get rid of them because they'll cost. Well, I could sell them for $200 a piece. They're expensive. They're purebreds, and I put a lot of money in my chickens. If there's a way of having whoever is in Suluco make a boundary like the Pelican Bridge, anybody inside town, maximum, say, start up at 4, but whoever already has chickens, try to be grandfathered in, because I just don't want to waste my time and waste your time and taxpayers' money just for me to come here to do an amendment saying, look, I've got 9 chickens, if possible, let me keep them. So whoever has them in town, just grandfather them.
I think that, if I may, I think that's the general intent, but that they more or less be registered so that, because how do you control the new people coming in? It would just be, I think the process would be quite simple to get the exemption, but then, so it would be difficult to grandfather in. It's grandfathering in, but with the clause that come in and register and show us how you're taking, how many you've got, and some kind of plan. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay, that's okay. At least it clarified that part of my saying, and also, for your chicken coop, the issue of being right on the side of the fence of your neighbor. I clearly
Thank you. I think there was somebody else. Please rise and state your name, even though we may know you.
Joey Franklin, I live on Drayton Road. I just want to speak, I just, I've been to the last two council meetings and, where the keeping of chickens has been discussed. And really no one from the point of view of a neighbor to someone keeping chickens has expressed their opinions or concerns. And again, I want to express that I'm not against the keeping of chickens, but I mean, what I'm currently experiencing now makes me want to say no chickens anywhere. But at the end of the day, if you got someone who takes care of the coop, has a reasonable amount of chickens for the size of property they have, it can work. I mean, the experience I'm going through is our neighbor, got chickens last year at 6 to start with, and no issues, no smells, no noises. In fact, my kids love it. They're over there all the time. And then next thing you know, you have 50 chickens. And the smells became horrendous when the wind was right. We couldn't open the windows. We couldn't you get out of your car. And it was just, the smell would overwhelm you. The noise, you had roosters, so every morning you're getting woken up. We don't have air conditioning, so we keep our windows open and make it cool the house down. Well, no longer could you do that because you're getting woken up every morning. And just the smell, I can't describe it. It was horrendous. And so, and that's what we went through last year. I mean, it wasn't every day. When the winds were right, we didn't get those smells. We always had the noise, but we didn't get the smells. And without the proper regulations in place, there's nothing that can be done about it. Because we're at that point, we were not enforcing it. Being on the inside, I kind of know the path we're taking. So I knew, I mentioned it to the neighbor about the smells and stuff. He said he'd clean up a bit more. But I don't want to start a feud with my neighbors. And so this year, same thing. He's still got about 48 chickens. No rooster, which is fine, but still, at 5 in the morning, I can hear these hens. And the smell. Some days it's not as bad as it was last year so far, but the smell is bad. And his coop is closer to my house than it is his house. And I got 2.5 acres. I'm well back from my property line. He has about an acre lot and with 50 chickens and about an 8 by 8 coop. And I just want to make sure, not make sure. I mean, it's ultimately it's your decision, and I think there has to be some regulation. We have to control. I mean, to me, the path is the size of your lot can dictate how many chickens you can have because you can increase setbacks. The bigger the lot, the bigger the setback, the more chickens. And and trying to define urban versus rural, well, Drayton is rural if you look at the definitions and the lot size is very from half an acre to whatever, 50 acres. And to try to lump all that into the same, and even like Cal was saying, even if you have 10 acres, your house could be next to your property line, within 5 meter, outside of the 5 meter setback. And, it doesn't make a difference. I don't know, I just want to make sure, or like I said, I'm speaking here as public who's experienced the negative side effects of being next to a chicken owner. And I just want to ensure that we regulate it appropriately and definitely no roosters. And I think that again, I think size will prop. And I think, with this exemption idea, it's going to be hard for staff to, how do you make those decisions? How do you decide that this neighbor, this property is acceptable for 50 chickens and this isn't, without some sort of guidelines or regulation? I guess that's it.
Thank you. I know Councillor Fallon had his hand up, and then Councillor Curlew. Yeah.
I understand the complaints now, so opening it up to exemptions is you're gonna open up a can of worms for everybody concerned, I guess. But you need some kind of complaint driven bylaw to deal with exactly what Jody's talking about and how we can take this what we have right now and put it together to deal with the complaints. You're going to go back to 4 and they have to come and get an exemption. Now you're going to have to send it out the complaint out, not a complaint, but you're asking for an exemption, you're gonna have to send it to the neighbors within a certain area in that neighborhood. That's one of the things that's probably gonna come to light when you start doing exemptions, because you can't leave out the public on something like that, right?
Councillor Curlew?
One of my question was in regards to that, Councillor Fenelon. The appeals process in the current animal bylaw, if Mr. Clerk could just refresh my memory on that. And secondary to that, I really appreciate the feedback that Jody, the resident, has provided. And I just also wanted the comparison to that from Mr. Che, and I wonder if you could speak to what kind of birds you have, because I've lived beside you for like 8 years, and I've never heard or had a smell. So I'm just curious to know what kinds of animals do you have?
So, Mr. Clerk, Councillor Curlew had a question for you.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, the current exemption provisions in the animal control bylaw deal with temporary exemptions. So the exemption is for a maximum of a 60-day period. So that obviously would need to change to accommodate what Councillor Bath has suggested.
Thank you. And Mr. Curtis September, did you want to speak or not? Yep. Thank. All right, thank you. Is there anybody else from the public that wishes to speak? Thank you. Councillor Timpson.
I was just going to say that, this discussion and in the investigations that I've done on my own about chickens, it just speaks to how much we need to know. We need to establish our own body of knowledge at a municipal level about chickens. And I like one of your suggestions here is we support a grassroots network of chicken keepers, and you suggest possibly the Environment Committee, to promote education and awareness, because it seems to me that chickens don't smell if people are looking after them properly, and if people learn how to look after them properly, then they're not going to smell. And so education of the chicken owners and us as a municipality, I think, is going to be really important, so to make this work.
Any further discussion at the council table? There's a lot of bad jokes that could be made about not being chicken to discuss this, but Mr. Clerk, do you feel that there's enough direction from the council table to?
Yes, Mr. Lawrence. Mayor Lawrence, thank you.
So, Councillor Bath.
One suggestion, I got Councillor Fenelon's suggestion that you talk to the neighbors. I don't think that's what we want to be doing. I think we need to be making the decisions based on the bylaw, and whoever makes it, whether it's council. The reason I like council doing it is because it takes it away from staff having to do it. Hopefully it puts more of the public obviously, if you have a neighbor you don't like, you're not gonna let him have chickens. He can't stop you from having dogs and cats, whether they live in the house or not. And so I don't think we should do that with chickens either. We should leave it as we have it. And if we, I don't know if staff or the people or not, I'm not gonna go there, but I don't think we should be asking the neighbors to weigh in on it. That's all. I'll stop. I promise, no more.
All right, so I'm not going to ask again about the direction, but I will ask, just to confirm that by voting in favor, we're basically accepting a report from staff? No, what are we doing?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, the recommendation is simply that council directs staff on how to proceed, and that's what you're doing this evening.
So do I need to even call a vote on this? What's the vote saying? So to put it back to you procedurally, thank you.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, you can withdraw. You can ask the mover and seconder to withdraw the resolution. However, that may send a message that you're not dealing with it, but that's your call.
So what is the vote actually requesting council to vote in favor of?
It isn't asking council to vote in favor of anything. It's just asking that council provides direction to staff.
I think that's done then, so the discussion is over. Thank you. What are we voting on? I guess that's we've given direction. I don't think there is a vote. Is that right? I'm not trying to be difficult, but.
Clarification, can Jody have 4 fox for pets?
I would need to check the list of exemptions.
Sorry, Mr. Clerk.
Yeah, so the resolution is just that council is providing direction to staff. However, now that I look at the second part of it, yeah, it's easier if we just withdraw it.
Okay. Mover and seconder, will you withdraw the motion? I'm sorry, mover and seconder, who? You'll need to
My apologies, Mayor Lawrence. Councillors Fenelon and Curlew.
You'll withdraw the motion, council having given direction to staff.
Yep.
Thank you. And I wasn't trying to be difficult, Mr. Clerk, but good.
We get to do it again.
Item 11, the council authorizes the passing of bylaw number 43-18, being a bylaw to adopt policy number 1-14, video surveillance policy. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Fenelon, seconded by Councillor Forbes, and discussion, Councillor Bath to start.
Just a wording issue I didn't particularly like. And it says in the bylaw, on page 6, video surveillance policy, item D, it says video monitors shall not be placed in a position where the public has easy access. And to view what is being displayed, I think that should be changed, where unauthorized persons have easy access. Just to take it away, because I don't think we should be nailing the public specifically. It's anybody who's unauthorized, which may be staff. I think that's all I had. That's it.
Council? Further discussion, Council? Councillor Fenelon, yep.
It's nice to see us moving along with the rest of the world where there's video surveillance on every corner of a city or something like that. And I think we should be looking at the same thing in certain areas around town where there might be problems with, crime and whatnot within the municipality. Because there is places, and it's advantageous to us to look at those issues that other people, other communities are having too.
I'll just say that the OPP inspector told me sometime a couple of months ago that they are looking at that and using, I think there's funding that they have access to, proceeds of crime funding that they're applying for, and will be coming to council with something to address what you're talking about. I think that will be coming in the months ahead. So it is under consideration. Further discussion? So did we need, was that a friendly amendment to the, and is that accepted by the mover and second, or could you review that amendment? Thanks.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, the proposed friendly amendment would impact Section 2 procedures, and in particular, Section 2.1D, where the word public would be replaced with unauthorized persons.
Mover and seconder are all right with that?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, that's Councillors Fennel and
Forbes?
Forbes.
Councillor Forbes, okay?
As long as the clerk's okay with it, I don't know how you define an authorized person.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, essentially everybody's unauthorized unless you're authorized. That's sort of the way the policy is written, so nobody gets to see it unless you're specifically entitled to see it.
Councillor Fallon? You're all right? All right, then I'll call the motion. All in favor? Carried. Item 12, clean desk policy. The council authorizes the passing of bylaw number 44-18, being a bylaw to adopt policy number 115, clean desk policy. Mover? Councillor Fanlon, seconded by Councillor Bath. Discussion starting with Councillor Bath.
There's one is a question and the other one is a recommendation. On the page 1 of 4, the very bottom of the page, it talks only about printed documents. Does this not deal with also with computers? Computer monitor, leaving your monitor on, walking away from your desk, that type of thing? Or did I miss it in there?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence. The intent is that it applies to any type of document, no matter what format it's in. The paper documents are of a higher security risk because of the nature of them. You can physically pick them up and take them away from your desk as opposed to walking away with someone's tower. But yes, the intent is to cover all types of records, and you'll also note that it's sort of this policy, as well as the video surveillance policy, as well as the records retention bylaw that council passed or gave permission to pass earlier this evening, are all part of this broader accountability framework. A framework around records management, information management practices. So if it doesn't specifically discuss it in here, it's documents are defined in other places, and the intent is that it covers everything. Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer.
The other one is on off-site procedures 2.2.1. It's really what's happening in here. It says here that without the express authorization of the department head, and in the case of documents, the manager of corporate services, municipal clerk. I'm concerned in this one that the manager of corporate services, municipal clerk, is making himself the enforcer, and I'm just concerned that he shouldn't be the enforcer, or the clerk shouldn't be the enforcer in my mind. That's fallback, because the clerk could go to a manager's office and essentially try to enforce the rule, and I don't know if that's what's intended.
Through you, Mayor Lawrence. No, that isn't the intent. I don't want that job, to be honest. The reason that particular phrasing is used, because you did forget one of the slashes there, document control administrator, Councillor Bath, is part of that title. And that's the reason it's in there, is because the document control administrator essentially is the one who needs to be responsible for how documents are accessed, when they're accessed, who accesses them, how long they've been taken out for, and so on and so forth. If there was a standard operating procedure to accompany this, like at an administrative level, how this would actually get implemented, if there was an issue with a department head, the manager of corporate services, municipal clerk / document control manager would bring that concern to the CAO, and the CAO would deal with the department head.
That means you're comfortable with it? Okay, that's fine.
Further discussion, council? I'll call the vote. All in favor? Carried. That ends items requiring separate discussion. Bylaws. Mr. Clerk, would you like to lead us through the bylaws?
Certainly, Mayor Lawrence. That the following bylaws be introduced and read a first, second, and third time and considered for passing by council. Bylaw number 37-18 being a bylaw to establish retention periods for records of the corporation of the municipality of Sioux Lookout. Bylaw number 39-18 being a bylaw to reduce the speed limit from 50 kilometers per hour to 40 kilometers per hour on those portions of First Avenue adjacent to Sioux Mountain Public School. Bylaw number 40-18 being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute an agreement between the corporation of the municipality of Sioux Lookout and the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation and OHFC for the airport commercial/retail expansion project number 8100330. Bylaw number 41-18 being a bylaw to...
Is that one...
Sorry, that one has been taken off. I was on a roll. Bylaw number 42-18 being a bylaw of the corporation of the municipality of Sioux Lookout to authorize the borrowing of funds from the Bank of Montreal for financing in the amount of $427,005.27 towards the cost of the mechanical lift, facilities truck, fire hall roof, and landfill loader. Bylaw number 43-18 being a bylaw to adopt policy number 1-14, video surveillance policy, and bylaw number 44-18 being a bylaw to adopt policy number 1-15, clean desk policy.
That bylaws numbers be read a first, second, and third time and passed. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Forbes, seconded by Councillor Southall. All in favor? Carried. No motions to reconsider. Outside resolutions request for endorsement. One, reunification of Ogre-Roma Conference, United Counties of Prescott and Russell. So you've seen the letter, and we'll put this motion. We put this motion on the floor. Whereas the Council of the United Counties of Prescott and Russell believes that the reunification of Roma and Ogre conferences would be beneficial for the membership as it would streamline costs, provide greater diversity of content, and increase participation rate. And whereas a number of member municipalities, including the UCPR, have requested that Roma Board of Directors reconsider its decision to end the Roma-Ogre Joint Conference, be it resolved that the Council of the UCPR respectfully requests that the Roma Board of Directors put the decision to reunite both conferences to a membership vote, and that this resolution be sent to the Roma Board of Directors, the Ogre Board of Directors, AMO, and the UCPR's local municipalities. Have we done that correctly? I need a mover? Or not? Excuse me. Do I need a mover for this? Even?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, yes. If council wants to consider it, you
okay.
need a mover.
Thank you. I'll ask for a mover. Councillor Bath, seconded by Councillor Curlew. And discussion. Councillor Timpson.
Just a question for those who attended both conferences. I believe you did yourself. What do you feel would be gained by bringing them back together, or was there any benefit to keeping them separate?
So actually, Councillor Curlew can perhaps inform this discussion in a moment. But a year and a half ago was when the split happened. So 2017, there was a separate Roma and a separate Ogre conference. And we as a municipality attended both. 2018, this year, it was just, we decided, I decided only to attend one. And we did that based on, and Councillor Curlew attended the other. What do I think? I liked it better when there was one conference. I thought it was a bigger conference. I thought it focused the ministers. I mean, part of the deal for us is we want delegations with ministers. There's only one happening. So with Ogre-Roma combined, you get the January-February cycle of delegations with ministers and the August cycle at AMO. This introduced one in January, one in February, and I think it diluted the interest from the provincial government and the ministers. It made it more difficult to get full attendance. So unless I'm informed otherwise by our Ogre board rep here, I would be in favor of having them combined. But I'd be interested to see what Councillor Curlew says.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Lawrence. And in terms of informing the discussion further, I think there was prehistory challenges administratively with the two boards, and that led to Roma's decision to form its own and therefore carry its own conference. And what we've seen in the past 2 years is a desire for many of the membership, to come back together, based on cost, based on interest, and based on the overall feasibility of the conference, and making sure that we maintain the interests of the small rural communities central to the overall infrastructure campaigning process. And so OGRA wants to work on this, and I think the issue of working together, collaborating again, came from Roma wanting to remain separate. So this, I think within the past 3 meetings, has been something that OGRA is saying we're committed to, and if members want to have resolution to put more pressure on Roma, then that is the best way to get everybody back to the table. If the membership is saying this is what they want, then the administration then has to take a serious look as to how can we resolve whatever challenges are there to make sure that we're giving the membership the best bang for their buck, and as opposed to being split and trying to then, you know, draw people here and there, which costs more money to the municipalities, and it dilutes our influence at the provincial level, and that's not what we want, right? So, in a nutshell, that's where we are.
Any further discussion? All right, I'll call all in favor of, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Forbes. All right, how am I looking? I'm sorry. Oh, did we-
Sorry,
I'm
through you, Mayor
sorry,
Lawrence,
Coun-
I've just noticed an error. I just wanted to make sure council knows what they're going to say here. So it's actually the Council of the Municipality of Sulicote
Oh, I
that's
wondered what-
passing the
thank you,
resolution.
that's-
My apologies. And in terms of where it'll be distributed, it'll be Roma Board of Directors, OGRA Board of Directors, and AMO. We won't be sending it to the municipalities of United Counties of Prescott and Russell.
Thank you, that was why I sort of felt awkward about it. Yeah, no, that's good. So we understand this is a resolution we're passing to basically advocate for the reunification of the conference. All in favor? Carried. Item 2, Kenora District Municipal Association Internet Presence Website Development. Whereas the KDMA does not have an online presence, which has been identified as a major roadblock. Not having an online presence has been identified as a major roadblock in growing advocacy initiatives. Whereas the KDMA hereby requests one-time funding from all district municipalities to fund the design of a new logo and website in order to increase the association's standing and improve lobbying efforts. And whereas the KDMA will not be able to fund the cost for this project without the additional one-time funding, since the current levy is just 10 cents per resident. Now therefore be it resolved that the Corporation of the Municipality of Sulicote donates funding of $1,000 to enable the KDMA to achieve its goals for better regional representation and advocacy. May I have a mover, please? Councillor Southall, seconded by Councillor Fenelon. Discussion. I'll offer that sitting on the KDMA board, I think this is worthwhile and necessary to increase the KDMA's interests are not always aligned with NOMA's interests, and it gives us an opportunity, I think, to advocate for our regional municipalities. Councillor Perdue and then Councillor Forbes.
The only question I had for you is the upkeep of the website, like the maintenance, who will be responsible for that going forward?
I think it's a small cost. I think it would be absorbed in the KDMA budget. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Forbes? Mr. Clerk?
Through you, Mayor Lawrence, this would likely come out of one of 2 lines. There is a grants and donations line that the council has, and if that is already all committed, I do happen to know that council does have a bit of room in one of its other lines regarding catering, hosting, so on and so forth.
And just further to that, now that we have a new riding and a new representative provincially, which is, we used to be the Kenora Running River riding, we will certainly advocate with KDMA provincially, but I'm going to informally suggest to the 4, this mayor being one of the 4 of Pickle Lake, Ear Falls, Red Lake, who are the municipal mayors in the Kiiwetinoong riding, that we form an informal association to meet periodically and advocate with our MPP for the Kiiwetinoong riding. no cost or anything involved at that time, but just it's sort of an informal subset of the KDMA that I'm going to propose to the other mayors. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Carried. Council reports. Let's start with Councillor Fenlon.
Nothing to report.
I think you're chicken tonight, right? Councillor Bath.
Spent all my time working on the chicken report. I haven't had anything else. Actually, I have some LCC stuff. I spent 2 days last week, Tuesday and Wednesday, actually Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday in Thunder Bay, attending an LCC, that's Local Citizens Committee, Forest Management Plan training course put on by M&R. That was about 6 or 7 different forest management plan teams there, so it was quite expensive. Talking about all the new changes in the plan, it's quite significant. The new plans are now, they used to be 5 years, the new plans are 10 years, and there's a ton of changes in them that are affecting, being recognized by the province as what the public is looking for. So that was day 2, that was Tuesday all day, and then the second day was the forest management plan, the Lac Seul Forest Management Plan. Pre-planning session was planning session number 3. That's just basically laying out how they're going to move forward. It's a pretty lightweight plan, or a lightweight session. What day is this? Wednesday. Tuesday night. That was last night. Tuesday night was a regular LCC meeting. So pretty much all I did there was bring the group up to date on what I'd learned in Thunder Bay and talked about in Thunder Bay. And I was late for that. I had to attend the taxi and the bus meeting, and that was interesting, actually. And then yesterday also, I attended PACE in Ignace. That was actually a very interesting meeting. We held it in the Nuclear Waste Management Organization's office there. Quite a nice project they've done. They are now, in 2022, they feel they'll be ready to start, 2022, 23, they'll be ready to start building a facility. Not necessarily there, but I'm quite convinced it'll be there. They've drilled their first borehole. It's about halfway between Ignace and Wabigoon. It's also it touches right on the edge of the Wabigoon Lake First Nations Reserve. They drilled the hole. It's 1,000 meters deep, and the core, they have samples of the core. The idea is to find out if the rock is stable, if there's any fissures in it. And the rock they brought out, it's so stable that they can't get water to come into the hole. They'd like that water to come into the hole and see what's going to happen in the future. No water wants to come into the hole. This rock is so high. It's 1.5 billion years old with the magma in the middle. It's pretty neat. It's actually worth going to look at. You can talk to the guy. He's pretty keen. So it's Ignace is certainly on board. Wabigoon First Nation is on board. Wabigoon is on board. Dryden is on board to support them. They're all what they call neighboring communities, and also First Nations communities. And the only community that's not on board in the whole area is Sioux Lookout. And we're losing money. Like, these guys give you money to promote you. And we aren't going to be drilling any holes or building one here, for sure. But you know, the fact is they're still looking, they're still willing to accept us as a neighboring community. And it's a big job, and probably in 2023 it'll start with the construction, like I say. That's a $15 billion job. It's going to go on for years. So, you know, it's a shame that we stuck our head in the sand and didn't respond just to be a neighbor.
Oh, we did. They said we weren't.
We're not, just a reminder that we're not introducing new items for discussion at the table. Council reports. Thank you. Thanks. Thanks. Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you. Councillor Timpson.
No, we did, I think it does need to be clarified. We attempted to be a neighbor, and they said no, because we wanted them to bring up experts.
Thank you. Now we'll
Both
go into
sides.
the council report, just so we don't start debating that and it's not.
No,
on
I'm
the
not
agenda.
debating. I just want to clarify that they must have changed that.
It is a form of debate in open state. Thank you. Let's move on.
And possibly we should clarify what this section is for, because it says comments and updates and comments. At any rate, I had a very interesting and enjoyable trip to Halifax for the FCM. I enjoyed it immensely. Other than that, yes, on the 17th of May, Friends of Cedar Bay had the third annual water festival, and it was very, 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 very good. Next year, we're hoping we will be able to have grade 4s and 5s. We're going to expand it. Secondly, I've been in touch with the Environment Committee concerning the report that we brought to Council in May, and Council approved the having a second public awareness session that was structured a little bit differently. Now, my understanding is, and this is just second hand from the Environment Committee, that CN does not want to participate in any more public awareness sessions. If there's anything that we, as the municipality, as the people who own the land there, can do to convince CN that the perception is that there's a perception of secrecy, of some sort of collusion, whatever. And I think if they could see that and just hold another session, it would be very beneficial for the community. I see Ann Saltel is here from the, she may want to speak to it later on. And let's see. So at some point, it would be really nice if we could get some more update on that.
I don't want to open a debate or discussion at the table, but I'll take that. Thank you. Go ahead, Jody.
Good, thank you. Another item that, I noticed that, well, Mayor Lawrence, you're going to be on the, or maybe on the AMO board, and Yolene is going to be on the executive of FCM. Did we clarify that your expenses would be covered by
Councillor
AMO?
Timpson, that was an item on, you could have lifted that as an item on the agenda. This isn't the time to bring that back to the table.
But aren't we here for questions and comments? Isn't this section for questions and
My
comments?
expenses for AMO are covered by AMO.
Okay.
But this is not the time to discuss that.
No, I
If
don't
you'd
wish
like
to
to finish
discuss.
your
I would just
report.
like a question. It would seem to me, in terms of FCM, if something that Yolene could take to FCM is that they would commit to covering the expenses of people on their board who
You brought that
are
up when we had it as an item on the discussion with
Yeah.
when it was a proper
For-
item to discuss. This is,
I think that we should clarify what
I
this section
think we
is
should
for.
too. I
Yeah.
fully agree with you.
I think we should be able to bring up anything just as we're not debating it, we're just stating
You're
facts.
inviting questions and inviting debate.
I'm just suggesting that possibly municipalities under 25,000 should have their
We had
expenses
that
covered.
debate at the time it came up on the agenda of the FCM.
Okay.
Either
Just wanna
either
be
you're
sh-
going to report on your
right.
activities, or I'll call you out of order and end your report.
All right. A question. The open house, or we have a meeting on the July the 18th at 5:30. In the bulletin today, it said the open house for the, what do you call it, the official plan is at the same time. Is that a mistake? Okay. Yeah, it was ambiguous in here. Okay. So June 25th is the open house. Okay. And it's also Hydro, isn't it? Or no? No? June where? Okay, all right. That's it.
Councillor Southall. Councillor Forbes. Thank you. Councillor Curler.
So in May, since the last meeting, I had participated in a webinar for FCM called Unlocking the Power of Diverse Women and Breaking Down the Barriers that women from different communities, so Indigenous, racialized, and immigrant women face in entering into politics. It was a panel discussion online, and the preparation for that was about a week, and then the actual webinar, about an hour and a half. Following that, I attended the Tribe Call Red event that happened here in Sioux Lookout on the Friday night, and then preparing for that, we had a couple of meetings for the CAO hiring committee, and then preparing for the FCM Halifax trip, which was quite involved because, as you know, I was running for election there, so that took up a lot of energy and effort. However, we were successful, so yay. And also FCM, which does cover the role of and the costs associated with anything that I have to do as third VP. That's separate from what our municipality has agreed to, which is to cover me the three meetings plus the AGM out of my regular budget. And the first event that I had to participate in as third VP was Monday, Tuesday in Ottawa, presenting at the Senate on the Senate committee, which looked at all four parties coming together to look at amending legislation to impact more women being involved in politics. So the first day was all briefings, and then in the evening we appeared before the Senate, myself and the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and Policy. And so we presented to the Senate on the barriers that women have expressed all over Canada, and particularly looking at rural context, smaller communities, and again, women from diverse backgrounds, some of the challenges that they face. We also had the opportunity to hear what Elections Canada is doing to impact the fall coming up, and other groups out east and out west, what are they doing to integrate more women and prepare them for entering into the election cycle that's coming up. And I was not able to attend one Board of Health meeting in May. And that brings me to today. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Curlew. During the month, I attended the KDSB regular board meeting in Dryden, participated in the Gay Pride flag raising and parade event, partook, as most of us did, in the CAO search committee and the special council meeting, attended the regular monthly Chamber of Commerce meeting, met with the economic development manager several times on the housing summit, sadly attended Mayor Phil Vanette's funeral in Red Lake, funeral service, which was very well attended. I'd say about 300 people there. It was an outside service interrupted by heavy rainstorm, so it moved, as it was planned to move to the golf club, but in Red Lake, quite small for the numbers of people, but a very great celebration for Mayor Vanette, who will be missed. On Monday this week, I addressed opening comments at an event at Lac Seul with the Law Society of Upper Canada, which is going to rename itself to the Law Society of Ontario, having to do with some of the issues that the Law Society had with their lawyers on the Indian residential school settlements. Met with GSA reps and Poverty Reduction Advisory Group meeting, and here today. Councillor Trudeau.
I was remiss to point out that Ontario Good Roads meeting in London, June 12th to 15th. Thank you.
I think we're completely ready to move into closed session to discuss matters of general nature, subject matter relating to a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board per municipal act as amended, and 2 items, Lac Seul Road and 1 downtown property. Second item, subject matter relating to personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees. 1 item, update to council boards, commissions, and committees for membership. So may I have a motion to move into closed session? Moved by Councillor Southall, seconded by Councillor Fenelon. All in favor? Carried. We are now in closed session.
I did not receive a copy of